We're excited to talk about the Bible and want to be faithful to examine as much of the text as possible. Unfortunately, we can't cover everything in a Sunday sermon, and lots of study and material get left on the cutting room floor. These episodes are our attempt to continue the conversation and cover as much of the Bible as we can. So welcome to the cutting room floor.
Well, we just finished the Book of Judges this past Sunday, and excited to have you guys here to discuss some of the content of it. What we said is we kind of focused in on chapter 2, and then we jumped all the way to 21, and we dealt with, a high-level overview of the Judges as we passed by. We didn't really examine too many particular details as much as we're trying to continue our exile theme throughout. And what we were establishing was that even in the Book of Judges, while you can be in the promised land, you can still have this cycle of unrepentance, of disobedience to the Lord. Then you cry out to him, then he rescues the people, and then after the judge passes away, rinse and repeat cycle all over again. And so we saw that through some of the judges that we picked on. There's actually 12 in this book, which seems appropriate that there'd be 12, right? One of those biblical numbers that repeats. And then we get to the end of the book, and in chapter 21, we kind of have this summary statement that coheres with the summary statement in chapter 2, that there was no king in the land in those days, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. So that's kind of the long and short of what we talked about this past Sunday. We were trying to point out that you can be in your promised land and yet be in spiritual exile. And we picked up on this theme again of the two aspects of exile. It's not just physical and it's not just spiritual. They both relate to one another. So I'm curious, as you guys have maybe had a chance to read the Book of Judges or think through the sermon this past week, do you have any questions for us to get started?
I made an observation that the beginning of Joshua, Moses dies. Beginning of Judges, Joshua dies. And then the angel comes to them and reminds them about the covenant. I think he even says they're not going to be able to keep it. But basically that means they don't have a leader because he had to speak to all the people.
Yeah.
And because they don't have a leader, I'm thinking maybe that's why they keep disobeying. And like you said, they have the pattern of having a leader,
Right.
coming back to God, and then falling away when they don't have a leader. So I guess the question is why can't they follow God without a leader or someone to intercede for them and to apply it to our own lives? Do we do that in our own lives, like put our leadership on pastors or other people?
That's a great question.
And
oh gosh.
yeah, and
Wow.
and another step of that is, as Christians ourselves, we try our best to follow God and live for him, but then we have kids, and sometimes they follow us and follow God, and sometimes they turn away, and how can we do we have any control of that?
Oh, great. God, these are like heavy hitting questions, man.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's great. It's great, Kevin. Oh my gosh. Well, let's deal with some of the observations that you made, and then we'll break into your questions. Yeah, chapter 1 is interesting in Judges because we have the death of Joshua, similar to the death of Moses, kind of a calling out of what's going to happen. And I believe, if I'm right, chapter 1 is just a kind of a flyby overview of the different tribes, all 12 of them, going into their particular land,
Right.
and doing the thing, removing the people, whatever it is, and inheriting or establishing that space.
Can I ask a question
yeah,
on
go
that
ahead.
point? It seems like later on, one of the tribes says, "Will you ask our tribe? Will you help us go?" Were they not going in as a whole group? Were they fighting individually as tribes?
Yeah, it seems like there was an initial wave of conquest, and actually, this is what Devin pointed out last week in our last cutting room floor,
Yeah.
that there's an initial conquest moment where maybe Joshua, all the tribes fighting men are together, and there's an initial wave that actually occurs. And I think they come across the Jordan about middle portion of the Canaanite land,
Right.
in order to conquer and then divide, or divide and then conquer, rather. So there's actually a practical reality to them going to Jericho first, because Jericho kind of is situated more to the south, but still kind of centrally located between the north and the south regions of Canaan.
Right.
And so Joshua brings in the fighting group of men, obviously with the tribe of Manasseh and Gad and Reuben going in first because they settled to the east. And so they come in first, and all the fighting men go together, and we have we think we can recreate the way that they came in. They first come in the middle, and then they go up to the north, and then there's some branch down to the south. And then what it seems like happens is what they're supposed to be responsible for is the particular land portion that they've been given, which Joshua and Eleazar give to them at the close of the book of Joshua, or somewhere towards the close of the book of Joshua. And once they have their lands assigned, then there's supposed to be a continuing removal, or a continuing disinheriting of those people from the land they've been in, to now having the Israelites establish themselves in those spaces. And actually, I was just, as I was kind of breezing through chapter 1 here, I see a particular mention in verse 34 of how the Amorites confined the Danites to the hill country, not allowing them to come down into the plain. So for all the language that we read in, Joshua about killing everybody and all this stuff, it's just, again, it comes back to this contextual language of hyperbole. It didn't happen quite that same way. There might have been an initial wave where the people could then establish themselves, but then it was incumbent upon them. It was their responsibility to continually drive out those people for the purpose of not making covenants with them and tearing down their altars. In other words, there's a spiritual signal in this wherein the people of God are supposed to establish this land as God's space. Yeah. Obviously, it's not only God. This isn't the only place where God can be, right? We believe that he's omnipresent. He's in all places. He's above all things in that way. But as far as it relates to this people and how God has chosen to work with them, they are supposed to understand that this is his space. This is the land that he's given to his inheritance, as we read in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 8 and 9. Because God disinherits all the other nations and inherits this particular nation that he's forming. So they come in an initial wave. I think they start north. I could be incorrect on that, but I think they start going to the north, and then they come back down south. And we read some of that, like with Caleb taking over his space, which would be close to the area of Ephraim and Judah in the south. Okay. And that's where Joshua kind of ends his conquest with the people, is he comes down into his area as well. So practically speaking, they divide, then they conquer, but then there's supposed to be an ongoing reality of getting rid of the people in the land, or dispossessing those places. And over time, they were supposed to more thoroughly establish themselves in that space. Okay, so then out of chapter 1, you're right. The next thing that we see is Joshua is now passed away. And what's interesting about that is we don't have, in the same way that Moses and Joshua, what we read about all the way since Exodus, that Moses has an apprentice, right? And that would be Joshua. Mm. We don't read that about Joshua.
Why didn't Caleb take it?
Exactly. Like these are some of the questions that, like, the text is clearly like flying by these moments on purpose, because there's not the same kind of intentional, or if there was, we just don't know about it because that wasn't a part of whatever God's plan was moving forward. There is no intentional apprentice that Joshua is going to guide to then be a leader of the people, because it seems like that thing has now happened. We had the religious savior for us, who would be Moses, right? He brings us out of the land. He establishes us as the people of God, and he gives us a religious and cultural identity as God's people. Then Joshua comes in and does the physical thing, which is to bring them into the promised land. And I think what God's intent is I'm going to be your king. You come to me. You go through the priests, you come to me. You as a people are reliant upon what I will tell you to do. And I think that's kind of an interesting observation you've made, is that there is no like, they had specific instructions once they left Egypt to go in and inherit the promised land. But then after that, what are we supposed to do? Yeah. It's almost like,
now that we're there.
Yeah, it's like now they're there.
And they
what are
were
we supposed to
warned
do?
not to follow the gods of that land.
Correct.
To get rid of them.
That's right.
They didn't.
But they didn't, and that's exactly what we read in Judges chapter 2, which is kind of like a summary statement even before the whole thing happens. And that's a fascinating moment, because I think it's probably a part of the rubric. I'm speculating now. Mm-hmm. But this is probably a part of the rubric that God would have wanted, which is that in lieu of there being a leader, I myself will be your leader. This is what it's going to look like. Okay. I'm going to come and inform you how things ought to go, whether that's through a priest or a prophet or someone else like that. That person would be kind of the leader, even if they weren't a Joshua or Moses kind of leader, or a, later on Saul, David, Solomon kind of leader. So I wonder if this was the rubric that God kind of had in mind, is these people's hearts are yielded to me such that they will come to me when they have, national or religious identity questions. Right. What do we need to do? Where do we need to go? What's our task? Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of similar to like God creates all things in 6 days, but then on the seventh day, he rests. And again, we don't mean he falls asleep or something like that, takes a nap. We mean he takes up the activities commensurate with rest. Like once my house is clean, I don't then just pass out on the floor until it gets dirty, and then I wake up and do the cleaning again. No, when my house is clean, I grab a vanilla Coke.
Enjoy the house.
Yeah. I sit down and I watch a show on Netflix or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like that's what I think rest was supposed to look like. And actually we hear from Hebrews later on, Hebrews chapter 4, that Joshua could not bring them that ultimate rest. So even the New Testament authors are seeing that there should have been some kind of like association with the Genesis 1 and 2 account, where the rest that the people were supposed to enter into was faithfulness to God and his covenant. What does it look like to live my life under God's rule and reign? Well, the same thing that we've been talking about since Leviticus, really. It's I plant crops, I raise my kids, I do the work of dealing with all these animals and that kind of stuff. I lead my kids towards the Lord. When they ask me, why do we celebrate the Passover and those kinds of things, I indicate to them that it's because God rescued us from out of Egypt. Like, it's supposed to look like regular life. And yet, into that, what happens is they end up rebelling. They make covenants with the Canaanites around them, whatever tribe it is, and they don't tear down the altars. In fact, that's what's said at the beginning when the angel of the Lord comes to them at Bochum. Now, you asked a couple of other questions, though, that I think are really important to deal with. Do we do the same thing in that we idolize our leaders in the church? Well, I'll put that question back to you guys. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I mean, to an extent, I think, especially as you come maybe early on to faith and you don't know, because you have to be led.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's no way to look at it that you can't be, that you're not being led when you're like first coming into faith. So yeah, I think to an extent you probably are like super reliant on. I mean, because I think about my own coming to faith I was super reliant on like other people telling me things of like, because I didn't know what does life look like as a Christian.
Right.
It looks completely different than when you're not a Christian.
Right.
It's like the whole death to old self, and you have to be born anew. I mean, everything just becomes different, and so yeah, there's a lot of reliance on needing, a good pastor. Because if you get, I'm not saying there's pastors out there with ill intent, but whatever.
But like just assuming it's a generic good old pastor,
Yeah. I mean, if they're not, I don't know, if they're not guiding like in the deepness of discipleship or something like that, of like let's do a deeper dive into this instead of it's like you've been saved, you got baptized, now go spread the word. It's like sure, but like how do I do that?
Yeah.
How do I spread the word? Well, you got to be in the Bible. Okay, but what does this mean? What
Sure.
does that mean? Like what does it mean? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And so, like, you're right. So you are kind
Yeah.
of reliant upon the
Yeah.
wisdom or, history
Yeah.
that this person has, whoever it is, maybe that led you to the Lord or whatever church that you find yourself in as a result of coming to the Lord.
Yeah. Now, I would also say that, I mean, it goes into the whole cycle of Christian maturity of just like, baby, child,
Young adult.
adolescent. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
And I think as you make that circle around, then it should be changing to where you're not relying on a person, but now you're relying solely on Christ, with other people supporting you,
Yeah.
supporting each other, to go do the things.
But in a similar way to our like own physical life cycle, as a baby, I'm completely reliant on my parents.
100%.
I have to be fed by them. I can't even feed my own self. And we could apply that spiritually speaking. When someone gets saved, they're a spiritual infant. They need what Paul would say. They need the milk of the gospel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they need the gospel message, and they need to understand how that then applies into their lives. And so I think there is a good kind of reliance then that would come through, whether it's community like we're doing right now, or it's a particular pastor or a particular disciple leader that you might have. I think there's a good kind of reliance that we have to have at some level.
Yeah.
But then I think the goal, like you said, is that at some point I have my of course, it's all reliant upon the Holy Spirit and upon Jesus. I don't mean to say this in any way that divorces from him in any way. But there is a reality that once I mature in the faith, once I mature in my understanding of what God's word is saying to me and how I'm living now, and I have like this pattern of life that's looking more and more like Christ every day, it is the reality that I don't need someone else to remind me to read my Bible. Like that's something I want to do as a result of the conviction that I feel in my heart that I should know God through his word. So like in a sense, I have a self-starting faith. Okay, you understand. Of course, it's all powered by the Holy Spirit, but in a sense, I'm self-directed. I don't need someone else to tell me what to do. I kind of have a function or a flow or a pattern of life that looks more mature than it used to. Now, but there's another element of this question, because I think what you're kind of indicating is, do we pedestal our pastors, in a way that's inappropriate? Yeah. So what do you guys think about that?
I think it's a huge challenge. I mean, I'm not.
Come on, Jim, tell us.
Challenge, right? It's a huge challenge because presumably it's probably hard to name a big thriving. And a church doesn't have to be big to be thriving. But,
right.
It's hard to have examples of, let's say, big thriving churches in the U.S. that don't have strong, charismatic pastors at the head, and it's very easy for them to get put on pedestals, and it's very easy for them to, have moral failures.
That's right.
Perhaps related to that.
Drink their own Kool-Aid.
Drink their own Kool-Aid. Believe their own press.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a huge challenge.
I 100% agree with you, Jim. I think there is a reality to our, because we like the answers they give, because we like the way they talk, because we like the thing that they're that they themselves are growing, even though it's not them. It's a huge network of people that are collaborating together.
It's what God is blessing and growing.
Correct.
Yes.
But we sometimes, because that individual is the touch point of our encounter with that institution, whatever it is, we vest all of the success in them. And I think that's where we can get into a dangerous spot.
Right. Yeah. I can ask you a question as a pastor. What keeps you grounded?
Number one, my wife. If I'm honest, like practically speaking,
right?
I mean, practically, of course it's the Lord, but practically speaking, I could say that all day, but these megachurch pastors that you might be mentioning who have these, and not even just them, it's just regular old pastors too, who drink their own Kool-Aid, who believe their own press, that pride can enter in somewhere. So I need accountability. My first layer of accountability is my wife, and because Rachel is so devoted to the Lord, she's very quick to and very faithful, I would say, to check me up when I'm in the wrong. And then and then another successive layer to that would be that we have our elders in our church who are checking in on me consistently, asking me where I'm at. Am I getting enough rest? Am I doing my own spiritual? Am I doing the things I'm preaching from stage?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I like that.
And so that's a really helpful, and they have full reign to be able to ask me hard questions and keep poking if they don't like my response. They've been given full reign to do that. So part of it is our structure that we've tried to do is we've tried to create a structure that doesn't allow me to become that kind of model, that dangerous kind of model where I'm the king or something like that. Sure. The other thing that I really, and then finally the thing that I think binds maybe the institutional reality as well as my interpersonal reality together is that I believe the Spirit of God is more faithful than I give him credit for. And what I mean by that is he's regularly pointing out my own sin. The Holy Spirit is regularly, through my time in his word, which I have to be faithful to.
Yes.
It's not just that I like to do it, because I do, but I notice that I can fall into what's called ministerialism. This is an old term from, I think, Spurgeon. I could be wrong on the exact quote there, but I think it was Spurgeon who said, as a pastor, you're not just reading the Bible so that you can then convey an exciting message to your people. You're reading the Bible to encounter God. And I think the more that I am faithful to remind myself that I'm just a dude. I'm just a dude. And I have this title because I think the Lord has blessed me with a brain to be able to do that, a mind to be able to do that, some skills to be able to do that. Doesn't mean I'm any better than anyone else. And I think the more that I can keep that in mind as a process of our institution and the people around me, the better off that the Holy Spirit can partner with them and me in that, if that makes sense.
And for all of us, that could apply to other areas of our life.
100%. 100%. That's just good advice, period.
If a Christian has had worldly success, it's good to stay humble and
that's right.
And realize that God blessed you with whatever.
That's it. And I think the more that I can ascribe whatever is good in our church, not to my own or our own activity, but to the Lord's activity in us and through us, the more that we can stay humble. And I'll tell you what, I remember when I was, this was about 10 years ago, I did a sermon at the last church I was at, and they posted, a quote on Facebook. And I remember the pride that welled up in my heart at seeing 24 likes on that. So, and that has now been, I remember feeling like, wow, what an impressive guy you are. But here was the irony. The quote they quoted me as saying was a quote that I took from someone else. So immediately my pride was tempered by, that wasn't even my statement. And I think I went on Facebook and said that. I was like, I appreciate this, but this actually is a quote from so-and-so. Wow. I think having a premium on integrity is really, really important. It's why we talk about discipleship and stuff like that. I myself have a disciple. He's actually sitting here with me. And my disciple gets to ask me questions that many people don't get to. Just as a reality of our closeness, our relationship that we have. And I can't lie to him because he'll just ask my wife. Who's also good friends with him. So he has access to me that I've granted him on purpose, because I want to be. I don't want to just lead a thing that everyone else does. I want to actually be involved in the thing that I'm leading, and so I think that's a part of it, is like recognizing that I'm no better than anybody else. My job's not uniquely harder than anyone else's. My job's not uniquely more stressful than anyone else's. It's a job like anyone else's. And God has equipped me to do my thing, And then of course we have Sandy, who's the real boss of the church anyway. And she keeps me humble too. Prayer is a premium. that we do as a staff. I mean, there's a lot of things. How about that? There's a lot of touch points. There's a nexus of things that gather together to help keep you grounded.
Can I answer the original question?
Yes, come on.
As far as leadership and how I view it, I personally have my time in the Word, and I try to pray on a regular basis, and I come to church and all that stuff, so I feel pretty good about myself, I guess. But as far as sharing the gospel, I'm hesitant a lot of times.
I hear that.
And in my mind, I think, well, if I can get them to church, then they can hear the pastor.
Sure.
He can present the gospel to them. It's like I know that's kind of backwards.
Sure. It's one way though. I
It's a
mean,
struggle.
it's one way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hear that. I hear that. I'm really good about being in my brain and talking about the stuff we were talking about. I'm really comfortable in this space. I get a lot less comfortable when it's someone who doesn't believe like I believe.
Right.
So I share the same struggle in my own heart, that same tension in my own heart.
Yeah.
Would you?
I want to get back to the accountability thing.
Yeah.
And I want to just repeat, the sense I get is you want this to be a church where everyone feels that they have accountability to someone else in the church.
Agreed.
And you want to model that for us.
Yeah.
And that hopefully will help you from becoming a Bill Hybels or
Sure.
Whoever else.
Any other example of
Any
pastors
other
who have a
pastor.
fall?
And we can think of a lot of them, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and I think that I'm acutely aware that is a reality. Like I'm acutely aware that there have been a lot of failures out there, and I don't want to contribute to that anyway. And so then that means in my own life I have to actually live by the things that I think are true.
But also as a pastor, what's got to be humbling to you is to think, probably everyone thought, I don't want to be one of the pastors that does that, and yet they fall,
And I think that that's the thing. And I don't know if it's a product of, my own unique history. I don't know what. But I guess I could, chalk it up to, I think God's in the midst of all this somewhere, obviously, and we all agree on that. But I think he's doing a unique thing. It feels unique to me. How about that? It's probably not, but it feels unique to me that he's doing a thing where he's regularly pointing things out from his word or other things from pastors that I watch and follow, and pay attention to, because I need to learn too. He's pointing things out to me, and I think he's made me in such a way that I'm interested by the interesting things of the Bible. I'm interested by the facts. But then somewhere in the midst of that, he'll hit me in my heart.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Supposed to.
Yeah.
That way.
And I get convicted all over again. And then I remember all over again my salvation. And then I'm reacquainted all over again with a God who loves me and who forgives my sins. And who's helping constrain me such that my sins aren't disqualifying kinds of sins. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Sure.
On the level of affairs and,
Right.
Moral failure and those
Right.
kinds of things.
Right.
And so,
Every pastor's a sinner, but
That's
not
right.
every pastor has affairs or steals
Correct.
money from the church, which I think are probably the two main things.
That's
that,
right.
That,
That's right.
That cause pastors to.
and a lot of that, again, like you said, Jim, is accountability. We've got to embed that as a reality. And then we just got to rely on one another, that we're sharing this load together. In fact, as I sit here, it's not just my disciple. I've got two board members who sit here, who help control some of the accountability of the church, who are helping watch these things, and make sure that our finances are taken care of, and that one another are leading godly lives. I don't know another way to do it. You know what I mean? I think there's a reason Jesus asked 12 guys, not one, to be the next wave of the kingdom message going out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's just tons of layers of security against it.
Yeah.
Kind of throughout all of it.
Yeah.
And then, but even throughout the Bible, you just see the constant of how iron sharpens iron.
That's right.
Two can defeat an attack
That's right.
that one cannot handle or be overcome to. What is it? In Ecclesiastes, a braid or a cord of
Yes.
three is not easily broken.
That's right.
I mean, it's all about community, community in it will keep you accountable.
And I think I've seen too, like in my own life, the issue of isolation. That's where Satan wants you, is in isolation. And the more isolated I become, the more distorted my own thinking becomes. So, it's good to be in community. 'Cause it's not just because it's good for me and my, bottom line. That's not what I mean. Although it does in a downstream effect impact that. But it's good just to have genuine relationships with people, because the more genuine relationships I have, the less likely I am to be in isolation and to play with sin.
Maybe it seems strange, but I get the sense that being a pastor could be, strangely enough, a lonely job.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that the way that even pastors were coached in seminary, not even, we'll just say a generation ago, was that you can't be friends with those in your congregation.
Wow.
You need to have friends with other people outside. And I hear that, because if you're friends with someone in your congregation and they don't like something that's happening in the church, then maybe all of a sudden you're not going to be friends all of a sudden. And that can really be a labor on your heart. But I think that the call of leadership at whatever level is a call to give yourself up.
Sure.
And to whatever relationship, wherever it goes and however it goes, we do our best to honor one another in the midst of that, even if things go sideways or left or right, and we deal with that once we encounter it. And whether it's pleasant or not, we still have, like, it's the same Bible for both of us. It's the same standard that we both have to subject ourselves to. And I'm not on a different pedestal just because I'm a leader. I have to do the same stuff that I would preach from the stage,
And I guess I'd also repeat, God calls us all to relationships, and
That's
relationships are just messy.
Period.
Sometimes they're just going to be messy.
And and I think the less I wish they were not messy, the less I square with reality. The more that I square with reality,
Sure.
the more that we can actually relate to one another on a genuine level, as opposed to a level of wish. And I think that, I don't know, who knows? Who knows why I think about it this way or see it that way? I think a lot of it has to do with when I was a reliant baby Christian. I had good parents who raised me well. And even though they raised me well, I was still a hellion who had to come back to the Lord at some point. But that was the Lord's work that did that, And then I had good examples of godly men and women who led well in their spaces. And they weren't perfect, but they led well. And I was able to, as it were, chew the meat and spit out the bones of whatever their examples were.
Speaking of your story, you've said several times that when you came here, you weren't looking to be a pastor.
Right.
It's like God had to talk you into it. And I think that
a good way to
that
put
might
it.
keep you humble.
Yeah, that's right. I've had enough experience and encounter. I mean, that's what wisdom is, right? It's having enough experience and encounter to now make new decisions. I have a chance or a choice to make new decisions based upon what I liked or didn't like in the past. So, yeah, and then anyway, we don't need to be up not to be offensive, up our butts anymore about this, but I think it is a valuable conversation. So I don't mean to deride it anyway. I think it's a really valuable conversation, in fact. And I don't know that there's a perfect answer to it. I think that you have to have something similar to what we have, and there may be even a better process that we'll find out, through time and choice, like trying new hats on, you'll find the right one eventually. I think it's like that. And I think being flexible enough to not like be stuck or constrained in any one way of doing things, but being convinced that maybe the way we do things is the way we like it, but always being flexible to reformation in whatever way that looks. That's the cry of the reformers, right? Reformed and always reforming. And so, but to your question, Kevin, your other question about leading your kids, because I think that's a part of what's on the table here in Judges, is that the one generation did not pass it down to the next generation. Was it you that read Psalm 145 a few weeks ago?
Maybe.
Or maybe you read Psalm 145 a few weeks ago.
146.
I can't remember who it was. It's one of my favorite Psalms.
Okay.
And one of the opening lines is, one generation will commend your kingdom to the next.
Oh, wow.
And I think that that's a really valuable thing that I mean, the church is equipped uniquely to do and is called uniquely to do.
It's 145.
Yeah, 145. We
Verse 4, one generation will command your work to another. They will tell of your mighty acts.
yeah. That's a vital thing that we have to do as a church, and and not just in our church, but in our families, because we would say that discipleship starts at home. You know, my first call is to my family, and so I have to be intentional. In the same way I'd be intentional to arrange a sermon and all that stuff here on a Sunday morning, I have to be intentional to arrange our life and schedule and habits to at least revolve around what we believe about God. And I'll just be frank and honest. I'm good at that in seasons, and then I fall out of that in seasons. And so it's, you know, it's a struggle to how about this? I heard Paul Washer say this about John Piper. John Piper being I think I may have even mentioned this last time we did Cutting Room Floor. Paul Washer is he's one of those famous pastor guys. He was talking about another famous pastor guy, a guy named John Piper, who's been in ministry now, I think, for like 70 years, something like maybe 60 years, something like that. And he's one of those guys, a rare, faithful all the way to the end kind of guys, unfortunately, at least in the big, famous space. He one time was saying that it's a struggle to read his Bible every day. It's a struggle to pray. It's a struggle to ask his wife, how she's doing, actually. It's a struggle to sit down and open God's word with his family and pray, and Paul Washer said, I appreciated that he said that because I find that to be true in my own life. That's a struggle to do these things. It doesn't just come easy for any of us to be doing these things, even if we like to do it. It's not easy.
Yeah.
So it's relieving to hear that even some of the our heroes, quote unquote, have these same or similar struggles that we do. But I think it comes down to intentionality. The more that I'm intentional with my own relationship with the Lord, the more that I'm going to want to share it with my kids and family. Now, that's no guarantee they'll take it up. Even if I was completely faithful. Let's just assume that.
Right.
Even if I was completely faithful to create a home that was formatted around God and faith, even if I was completely faithful to do all the right things, it's not always true that if I train up a child in the way they should go, they will not depart from it. That's generally true, but that's not always true. I think
it's hard not to put it back on ourselves to
blame
ourselves.
Yeah.
The statistic is like 70-something%.
Right now.
I just heard this like the other day. Yeah. Well, no, granted.
Which way?
To follow. Well, especially specifically if both parents stay and go to church and live the life, it's like 70-something% of the kids will follow suit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, pretty good odds.
Yeah.
But it's also
it's not perfect.
Yeah. So there's a whole quarter that just don't.
Yeah. And so, there's, I think that as much as we can lead the horse to water, right? Yeah. They've got to want to drink. And I think the same is true of our kids. The way that I heard Matt Chandler talk about this a long time ago, and I love the way he phrases it, is our task as parents or as leaders in churches or whatever is to set the kindling up for the fire. But none of us spark the fire. God has to do that.
Wow.
And God knows the right timing for that. And then, of course, there's also a responsibility on their end to actually make a decision to follow through. I was raised in a home that was, at least from my dad's side, and then later on my mom's, but from my dad's side was very much patterned around faith. And yet, when I was in college, for 3 years, I ran from the Lord while in a Christian college, while going to Bible class and enjoying Bible class, running from the Lord in the midst of that. And it wasn't until I had a Daniel chapter 1 moment. What it says is that Daniel resolved in his heart to not eat of the king's food. And there's this resolve thing that has to occur at some point that yes, I do believe all this stuff. Now I'm going to live for it for real. And I think, but that requires intentionality. None of us accidentally fall into intimacy with one another, or with the Lord. That requires intentional effort on our side. So, I think you're right, Kevin. It's hard not to point back at myself and say, well, what could I have done? What should I have done? What didn't I do? What did I do? You know, all those questions then swirl in your brain. And I think
something I learned in parenting is no matter what, you're raising kids that are people, and people, no matter what, they're going to do their own.
That's right.
They're going to make their own decisions.
That's right. And that's a hard reality to swallow sometimes, especially if our kids don't end up with the same value set we have or whatever.
Yeah, they'll do what's right in their own eyes.
You know, which is the way it goes. You know, and so I think our task then, Kevin, is we're not in the results business.
Yeah,
we're in the obedience business. You know, my task is just to be obedient as far as I'm able. And then I just leave it up to the Lord, and then I pray really hard. And I just hope that God really is a jealous God. You know, I actually hope that, because if he's a jealous God, then that means he's going to go after his own. And if my kids are a part of those who will hear his voice and respond, then he's going to go after them. You know?
Yeah.
But is Jim's Christian view that sometimes that might mean some of our kids who are not, you know, seeming faithful might end up having to go through some tough times. And
that's right.
And, you know, it could be very hard as a parent to watch them go through that. And I'm not watching a child go through hard times, by the way, right now, particularly because of unfaithfulness, so that I can see. So,
but yeah, I mean,
when I hear that, that's where my mind goes is, okay, God's a jealous God. You know, what will he let people, you know, those I care about go through to bring them back, or us when we're not faithful too?
Amen. It's not just them, it's me too, you know. And I rely on that element of his character. I know that sometimes that's a weird thing to think about God, that he's jealous, but we mean it in the righteous sense, the way that a spouse would be jealous for their spouse. You know, it's like, you're not allowed to, you know, no one else is allowed to have Rachel the way that I get to, because she's my wife. And if someone tried, then the response should be a righteous jealousy that wells up within me. And I think that God views us that way. And that's even the kind of covenantal language we've been reading about.
But it's also cool because it reflects how much he loves us too. Right?
Yes. Yes.
It's also an awesome thing.
I agree, and I think that, you know, I'm just going to rely on that element of his character, that he's going to go after his own, and I'm going to pray, and that doesn't stop my responsibility to continue to share the message in whatever way is appropriate with those people. You know what I mean? Whoever they may be. You know, I'm going to be really faithful to try and convey that message as best I can. So, you know, but I'm not in the results business. I'm my business is the obedience business.
Right.
But I can also say, as a father of adult children, that it is very gratifying to see faith in there. I mean, just like almost makes me want to cry.
Yeah.
You know.
Good.
Like, super cool.
Good.
When it happens.
The Lord is faithful.
Yes.
So on the obedience note, let's talk about how we consistently see through like 27 on in chapter 1 how they did not drive out all these people.
I was seeing that too.
Yeah. That's like
how interesting they point that out.
Yeah. It's like quite a few times here, like 5-6 times. They just 6-7 maybe. Who knows? They did not drive out and so it's like so there they are. Instead of being obedient, are compromising with the Lord, because some of them put the Canaanites to work, and then you have the Lord who comes in and it's like, these people are going to be thorns in your side, and their gods will be a snare to you. I thought that was pretty.
I've heard a pastor say there's no such thing as just a little bit of sin.
Correct.
Wow.
It grows. I remember back to a movie. It was one of the VeggieTales movies that I grew up with. There was a movie called
About the lie?
Yeah, the rumor weed.
Yes.
It was the rumor weed with Larry the cucumber. And it doesn't matter if you've never seen this or not. The whole point is that weeds grow and they grow really fast. And that when one little fib doesn't ever exist as one little fib. That rumor is going to grow, or that fib is just going to grow and grow and grow and grow, and eventually it's going to take over a space.
He
And so
wants to control.
you're right, Jim. There is no little sin, and that's a part of the issue, is that they didn't remain faithful to the covenant the Lord gave them. They in fact made covenants with the other peoples around them, and they didn't tear down the altars. That would then become a snare to them. And so I don't know that it's right to say that the response of God is that, okay, fine, then I'm going to leave these people here. No, it's not really that so much as they weren't faithful to be partnered with God's removal program. God was the one who said, I'm going to be the one who's going to go out and remove these people ahead of you. I'm going to send the hornet. I'm going to send the dread, all that stuff. God's saying, I'm going to be faithful if you are partnered with me.
That's what you mentioned in the sermon, was it needs their active participation.
That's right. And because they shirked that, or they, denied that, rebelled against that,
Right.
God's like, I'm not going to do your part for you.
Yeah.
I'm going to work with you.
Yeah.
And so that obedience piece, you're right, Miguel, is so vitally important. That's all that God expects of us, in fact.
Yeah.
And it seems, because even what good connection here. We're not in the results business. The same way that God is saying here in Joshua and in Judges. I'll take care of the results. You just need to be obedient to do the thing I'm asking. Yeah, and then they but ultimately what God decides is that because you're not partnered with me, these people are going to remain, and I'm not going to drive them out, and they're not going to stand as a test.
Yes.
Is how God phrases it.
Yes.
And could we say Israel is still dealing with that today?
Absolutely. And guess what? Not just them, us too. That's here's the reality. It's like, if I won't drive out these idols that are in my own heart, because like obviously the idolatry of the Old Testament is very different than our idolatry now. But it is connected in the sense of anything that takes God's place as central in our life, as the number one thing in our life, that's idolatry.
Yeah.
And so I have that task too in my own life, where I have to remove idols, and that's not an easy process.
No. Well, we were just like talking the other day. I was telling we're talking about money and how I think it's probably like the easiest one that people can probably relate and understand to, is just like how money can be its own idol. Because it's like, am I going to put more? If someone's like, if God's like, trust me and I'll take care of this.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you how. I'm just going to do it.
Right.
Am I going to trust that, or am I going to trust somebody who comes in like, here's $1 million.
Yeah.
To just do this.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man, which one do you take there? It's I mean, not the easy one. Yeah, it's like God's the answer, but I'm like, hey, if you got a bunch of debt and all these other things, like this will solve a lot of problems.
Right.
It's like, where's our obedience really lie here?
I'm going to share some YouTube wisdom.
Okay.
I think I saw on
Do you need to
YouTube.
come up here?
You need to come up here on camera, Jen.
Someone espoused that what you think about in the shower reveals idols. Or
Interesting.
What is really important to you in your life.
I was singing Ace of Base. I saw the sign this morning in the shower. I wonder what that means. Here, we'll scooch up and make some room for you, Jim. Grab a chair. Come on up here.
Okay. We'll get there.
It's true. I mean, and maybe money is an idol for me. I mean, I do, maybe I do think about that in the shower. So, again, I think there's wisdom there. I mean, it hit me, and I don't even know if it was a Christian that I heard say that, but it was somebody that said, whatever you think about in the shower is, what's really important to you.
Interesting.
And maybe it's just because the shower is kind of a mindless,
Well, it's like almost it's alone time.
Yeah.
It is very much alone time.
It's like it's where you're like alone when it's like same thing when you're driving.
You're alone with your thoughts in
Yeah.
the shower. Yes.
Yeah, because I think most people do all the works of the shower like mindlessly.
That's
Like,
right.
It's just routine. Like I know, you probably don't have to worry about washing your hair too much, but I do.
No, I don't. No, but I do shave in the shower. Shave. So.
Yeah. And I think you guys are right. I think, well, and Jesus himself says this, right? Like, where you spend your money is a revelation of your heart. What you think about is where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And so it's not just money, obviously. It's like you said, it's where your thoughts tend to in the quiet moments where your brain is allowed to wander in a way it wouldn't when you're doing a task. I mean, idolatry, I think, is the big thing now for the rest of the Old Testament. Well, it's been a big thing. How about that? But it's really now, I think what Judges is doing for us is it's setting the stage for this issue this spiritual background reality that we're going to see throughout the theme of exile from here on out. Yeah. Is that these people groups are going to stand as a test that they can snare you.
Weren't driven out. Yes,
that's right. And in it, interestingly enough, it will become the same thing that Solomon is going to deal with. It's in a different kind of way, but David and Saul are going to deal with this in their own way. This is the thing that's indicated by what happens later on in the king's narrative. Anyway, we could go on and on about that, but this idolatry is going to be a big issue moving forward.
Right. At the risk of getting sidetracked, I'm trying to think of where idolatry was a David issue.
Yeah, maybe not in the particular sense that it's here, laid out here, but it's, I would say, in a sense, well, back to our isolation stuff. Mm-hmm. David's in isolation, if you want to put it that way.
Right.
And that's what leads him into, in the time when the kings went out to war, David was back.
Yep.
He had sexual sins, and that went down his whole line.
From then on,
he didn't try to stop any of his kids from doing it.
That's right.
He didn't reprimand them.
Right. He had an idolatry. If you want to, if we're using kind of the more modern understanding of idolatry, he had an idolatry, I think, of comfort, where once he got into a comfort place, he didn't want to have to deal with the difficult things. Yeah. He was content and comfortable to be in his space.
Interesting, because when you said idolatry, I thought the traditional, yes. And that's more relatable for us because obviously,
correct,
yeah.
So I think this is again, but okay. How about this? We could attach idolatry as the downward expression of where our heart is, right? So it's the downstream reality or effects of what we believe in our hearts. That's exactly what Moses has been talking about. This is why we need the circumcised heart of Deuteronomy chapter 30. It's why we need to be yielded to the Lord as Joshua calls them to at the end of the book of Joshua. Because in fact, at the end of the book of Joshua, he's having to tell these people, get rid of the idols that you guys have collected. It's like within one lifetime, within just a little bit of time of comfort and ease in the land that they're now in. It's described as you will eat of the fruit of vineyards you did not plant. You'll live in homes you did not build. Like all this stuff is provided for them, and as soon as they hit comfort, and they all of a sudden, like now it's us that have done this for ourselves. Look how amazing we are, and we start to forget these things, and then we start to see the world's sway around us, and that's what it was like for them. They then attached themselves to these other idols through covenants with these people.
You defined idolatry as redefining good and evil in their own terms. Anything that takes God's rightful place as the ultimate object of my love and worship.
That's right.
So
that's a good definition.
Yeah. Good you came up with it.
That's a good definition. Anything that takes the place of the affection of my heart that God is supposed to hold. Yeah, I mean,
it all comes back to the heart, doesn't it?
Yes, every time. And I think that's the major story line that we're tracing here with exile. It's like I can be in the promised land and yet my heart can be far from the Lord. Yeah. We can have an end to this exile narrative and yet not be exactly where God wants us. And that's not his fault. That's our heart's location more than it is our physical location, And so then as you read on in the story here, we read about these particular judges. Do you guys have a favorite judge in the list of judges?
Interesting.
I'd be curious about that. I'll tell you mine while you guys think about that.
Yeah.
Actually, Kevin has a diagram here of our 12 judges, but my favorite I think is Ehud.
Because he's left-handed.
Well, his story's so interesting. I just love the story.
Are you left-handed, Dave?
I'm not left-handed actually, but I love the story of Ehud where you have this left-handed assassin. Who sneaks his way into this place, and he kills the king Eglon, who is so fat that the sword gets buried inside of his fat folds, and Ehud is able to then abscond, get out of the place, and deliver the nation as a result. And I just, and I'm a middle schooler sometimes, and I think fart jokes are funny. And, there's kind of some fart jokes in Eglon's death. And so anyway, all this kind of stuff. And so I think it's very funny.
I think my favorite would be Gideon, just because he kept saying, "Who am I? I'm the least, and then we're the least of the tribes." And when the angel found him, he was in a threshing hole, and
Hiding.
He was hiding, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and he's not what we think of when we think of a warrior,
Right.
but God used him.
He's the reluctant judge, which I find really fascinating.
That's a good word.
He's like, and it's like God has to drag him into this place of leadership.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting. What's interesting as you go down the list of judges, there's all, not only is there the cycle of like that we've been talking about in the judges, faithfulness to God, oppression or under the judge dies, then oppression from the other people because we forget the Lord. Okay, rinse, repeat. We got all that. Right? Not only is there that cycle though, there's also a cycle downward. The further you go through the judges' narratives.
Yeah. Well, that kind of starts with Gideon too, doesn't it?
No, actually, it starts with Gideon's about halfway through. I think. It's a
Well, isn't he like where that downward spiral?
Oh, I see what you mean. In his own story.
Yeah.
Yes. Gideon starts.
He starts good. However you want to word it.
Are you saying the further along, the further away they get from God?
Yeah, so like it's kind of like there's like a spiral as the cycle goes, and it's even true that like a judge like Gideon doesn't really end well. Like the end of his story is actually not a great end.
Sad.
No, it's really not great. And maybe that's not true of Deborah or Ehud necessarily, who are earlier judges in the line, and maybe it's not true of some kind of offhand judge who's only a judge.
Samson wasn't following God,
but there's a big, for instance,
because he was like only self-serving.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
I think even in the end, it was probably like. I think that was
I'm gonna take these people out.
Exactly. Yeah. Not because. Yeah. Anyway.
Which is reminiscent, or maybe Jonah's story is even a little reminiscent of how Samson acts. It's like Samson. It's kind of ambiguous. Is Samson doing this for the Lord, or is he doing this to get out of his slavery and the fact that he's been blinded now?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of hard to know, and it is the case that God is that grants him that strength to be able to accomplish that. But like you're kind of left wondering, like, is that good? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And I think the text is written that way in the same way that Jonah is written, where you're looking at this prophet and you're like, this is not a good guy. like he's got a significant like racist, streak as far as it goes with the Assyrians. But not only that, I mean, you can understand it to some level because the Assyrians were, not very nice people.
Sure.
They were really brutal, in fact.
Right.
But yeah, like the end of the story for Jonah, same for Samson, I think is supposed to be a kind of a reflective mirror for us. That like, okay, I can start well, but is that a guarantee that I'm going to end well? And the only way that I end well is by being faithful through the midst.
Like with Jonah, I've been told by God, do this, or I felt like God's saying to do this, and I'm like,
no, I'm going to go to Tarshish instead. Yeah,
really.
I'm going to go to Timbuktu. It's like kind of the same way of phrasing it in our modern day. I'm going to go to the middle of nowhere instead of do what you've asked me to do. And it almost feels like that's kind of like what Samson does as well. Like hardly any of what Samson does is as a result of what God leads him to do. Does that make sense? Like a lot of what Samson does is so that he can get a Philistine wife, even though he's not supposed to.
Right.
It's like, the tying of the fox tails together. Like all of that is for Samson's own benefit.
Yeah.
To fulfill his own desires. Samson has a Nazarite vow, which means that's the reason his hair is never cut, and the source of his strength.
It's supposed to bring him closer to God, wasn't it?
Correct, because that's exactly what a Nazarite vow is. A Nazarite vow are particular things that I abstain from so that I can have like this particular connection with the Lord in the things that I'm focused on. So I'm not focused on my outer looks and those kinds of things. Instead, I'm focusing all of my attention towards the Lord. It's kind of like what we would do with a fast. It's like anytime I get hungry, the goal is that I need to remember to pray right now. You know, like I'm being reliant on the Lord. We don't really see that with Samson at all. We have just kind of this odd story about him trying to get a wife the whole time. Like that really is, like if you wanted to put Samson's story in a nutshell, it's like a strong guy who wants to be with women. Like that's his story. And it is the case, and he's the last judge.
Yes.
He's not the final judge. The final judge would be Samuel, actually, that we then get to. But which actually Samuel does a pretty good job. Samuel's a really faithful judge.
Right.
But Samson is the last judge that we have in the Book of Judges, and yeah, man, his story's not good. And actually, the stories subsequent to him are not great either. Deborah's kind of a highlight. Ehud is kind of a highlight, but outside of them, maybe Othniel, the first one, you get kind of some highlight moments, but otherwise, their stories are mixed stories. Some good and some bad. So I am fascinated by Deborah's story, even if she's not my favorite judge. I am fascinated by her story.
Yeah, because wasn't she like? Well, it's fascinating because one, because she's a woman,
right?
And in this time, and then two, but I think it's fast because it's like she's a woman who like takes up this call. It seems like when other men are not.
Correct.
I think that's really interesting.
Now it is said of her that she's already out there leading the people in some way. Like I think she's underneath an oak.
Palm tree, I think.
Oh, it's a palm tree.
Yeah.
She's underneath a tree, and she's out there giving some guidance and counsel to people.
She was judging Israel at that time.
This makes me. So this is what's interesting to me here is it makes me want more. It makes me want David to do a series on judges because I want to see, because we have all these like quirky, maybe not even particularly faithful people that God uses. I mean, can we say God uses all the judges?
Oh, absolutely.
And yet somehow God uses them despite their lack of being really faithful followers of Yahweh. So yeah, it seems like it'd be almost like Bible Project kind of interesting of like, again, the Bible's such interesting literature because there's a lot of messiness in there.
That's right. It's realistic. It's not.
Right.
It's not hiding the difficult elements.
Right.
It is fascinating that I've heard it this way. The Puritans used to say it like this: God can draw with crooked sticks, and I think all of us are that. All of us are crooked sticks, and yet He can still use us to develop His masterpiece, as it were. And I think that if I'm reading the judges' narratives where I'm not trying to insert myself in the story as much as I'm trying to see God's character in the midst of it, then I come away with a different kind of conclusion than, well, everything's hopeless and nothing's good and I'm so much better than these people because I don't live this way, or whatever kind of conclusion that would be a lot more me-centric. Whereas if I come to the Bible reading it to understand who God is and what His character is like, then I'm going to be able to walk away, even from the bad stories, going, isn't it interesting that the Lord can use such compromised people to accomplish His tasks, to preserve His people who are in the midst of oppression, who can lead His people back to Him, even if He knows they're not going to be faithful in the future. I think it is that we're seeing a display of God's goodness in the midst of the judges' narratives that are not so good. But I, getting back to Deborah for a second, I think she's a really interesting signal to us in the text that God's desire is not just to work with men. He will work with whoever's faithful. We've seen a lot of examples so far in the story where the woman is the hero. Moses' wife, Zipporah, is one example. Without her, in the circumcision whole thing, the bridegroom of blood thing, thing we read about in Exodus, Moses would have been dead, and our deliverer would have been taken out. That's not a good deal. And on and on and on we could go through the list, but I think Deborah stands as this really interesting and impactful moment that reminds us that, in fact, it's called the Palm of Deborah. She held court under the palm of Deborah. She judged the nation under her own palm, I guess, her own palm tree, famous enough that it was considered hers. And again, it's not just that she is leading the nation in a military sense. because that's not all the judges were supposed to have been doing. They were supposed to be like Joshua, where they not only militarily lead the nation to safety, but they're also supposed to lead the nation towards faithfulness to the covenant of Yahweh. And that's what it's seen here that she is doing. I also love, go ahead.
At the end of chapter 5 that talks about her and her song, and then very last thing says, then the land had peace 40 years, but then beginning of 6, again, Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord.
That's right. It seems like they haven't figured out quite how to pass on the events that have occurred in their lifetime onto their children. It seems like they have not found a way.
But that's why Moses in the law tells them to keep telling their children.
Correct. Deborah's song, by the way, is really, really good. I understand there's some warfare language and stuff like that in there, but I'm trying to remember if there's even a kind of prophetic utterance of the Messiah coming as a result of what Deborah reads. We'll have to look that up in a minute.
So outside of Samuel, who isn't in the book of Judges, but is in First Samuel, right?
Yeah.
Would you say? Do you think that Deborah is the most faithful of the judges?
That's a good question, Jim.
And it's interesting and cool if true, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, I mean, obviously none of us here are women, but just cool that a woman would be the most faithful of the judges. Although it's interesting because churches are largely upheld, modern churches in the United States of America are largely upheld by women, right? That we think of women as being largely more faithful in our churches than men.
And I think it might have been Rodney Stark, who's a secular historian, who has identified that,
he ended up at Baylor. Started at UW, ended up at Baylor.
But if I'm right, I don't know if he's a believer or if he's agnostic. I could be wrong on this. I could have some of his timeline wrong. But anyway, Rodney Stark has pointed out that in the history of the church, it's been about a 60-40 split. It's been a majority woman movement, if you want to put it that way. Obviously, that's not the way that God would label or characterize, the movement of the kingdom of God spreading forward. But it is the case that the constituents who make up that kingdom have more often than not been women. And I think that that's a really important thing for, depending on which tradition you come from, for certain traditions to hear. Because it is the case that women are a vital element for what God is doing in the world. The first people to hear the gospel message and to be the ones who declare it are women, for that matter. I'm looking up here an answer about, was Deborah's song prophetic?
Let's ask Google if
that's what I'm doing right now, asking Google. Prophets often act as messengers of God's judicial decisions. In the song, Deborah issues a prophetic curse against those who failed to join the Lord's cause. Okay, the significance of this is that it isn't just a personal event. It is presented as a word from the angel of the Lord. So this is what she says. Curse Meroz, said the angel of the Lord. Curse its inhabitants bitterly because they did not come to the help of the Lord. That's verse 23 in chapter 5 in her song. Deborah is functioning as a prophetic mouthpiece, delivering a divine verdict on a specific city for its spiritual and military negligence. That's fascinating. Here's another part. A major theme in prophetic literature is the theophany, which would be a manifestation of God, an appearance of God. Okay. Right. Deborah's song begins with a prophetic description of God marching from Edom, causing the earth to tremble and the mountains to melt. Ooh, that's great language. This imagery is highly prophetic and is echoed later in the works of other prophets, such as Habakkuk chapter 3 and Psalm 68, which we've looked at Psalm 68 quite a bit, actually. She's revealing the hidden reality, that the victory wasn't just won by soldiers, but by the cosmic intervention of Yahweh. And then finally, one of the most famous lines in the song has a mystical prophetic quality. From the heavens, the stars fought. From their courses, they fought against Sisera. Now, this is fascinating because this now attaches to the background spiritual reality. Because in the ancient conception, in the ancient worldview, angels were stars. The stars were the angels. So, if you want to say it that way, the spiritual beings and their cosmic, faithfulness to God or rebellion to God, Deborah is now summing up in verse 20 of Judges chapter 5. From the heavens, the stars fought. From their courses, they fought against Sisera. While this is poetic, it serves a prophetic function by declaring that the entire created order is aligned with God's purposes. It reframes a muddy battlefield as a cosmic event where the elements themselves were commanded by God to defeat the Canaanites. And this would be actually, again, a part of the giant signals that we're seeing. Not that Deborah's fighting a giant, but again, there is unfaithfulness in the land due to faithfulness to other gods, which is a spiritual reality. And the judges, a part of what they're doing is they're trying to bring back, through the physical foreground events that we see, they're trying to bring people back to the spiritual reality that we need to stay in covenant faithfulness to God. And so actually the foreground events are indicating a background event as well, which is that there's a cosmic warfare for the hearts and minds of people. And Deborah seems to be calling this out. And there's more to say here about that, but I think her song is really, really fascinating. Anyway, go ahead.
So who's Cicero in this?
Yeah, Sisera is the commander of, I think it's the Edomites is who they're fighting against. That's who, and in fact, another woman is the one she's the one who slays Sisera. Yeah, Jael is her name, and she sends a tent peg into his head.
His temple.
Into his temple, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Google AI says, while the Book of Judges highlights several leaders, Deborah is widely considered the most consistently faithful and exemplary judge.
Wow.
Unlike others, her story shows no major moral failings or personal weaknesses, and she is noted for unwavering obedience, prophetic leadership, and the role of, quote, mother of Israel, unquote, who brought 40 years of peace.
Wow. So there you go.
There we go.
See, I don't know, because you have the first one of Othniel.
Sure.
Oh, he was pretty faithful too?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it doesn't say anything.
Doesn't say much.
But I think it's the only one that says the Spirit of the Lord came upon him and he judged Israel.
Oh, fascinating.
And he's also Caleb's younger brother. But it's the same thing. It's like, so the land had rest for 40 years. So we're going back to this term of rest.
Yeah. But it is, what is different about Othniel's narrative is that it's like 6 verses versus hers, which is like 2-3 chapters.
Correct. Yeah.
And across her account, Gideon was probably the largest story or the longest story. But yeah, next would be probably Samson's, and the next would be really close Deborah's.
Yeah.
And so it is interesting that she is at least along with the other most faithful judges. But again, what's so striking is that she's a woman, which of course, military conquest and leading people, in a lot of traditions and throughout a lot of history has been particularly a man's job.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's interesting that God raises her up and uses her as number one, his mouthpiece to judge the people, and number two, the leadership element that she provides for the people for those 40 long years.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's a really fascinating story.
So what does that term, the land had rest, mean? If there's rest, does that mean they weren't disobeying and falling for the idols, or was there something else?
That's interesting, because like what immediately goes to my mind is Cain or Abel's blood cries out to me from the earth. That's what immediately enters into my mind, is that the earth stands witness to our violence and is in some way, in some metaphorical way, calling out to the Lord as a judgment against us. And I think about like what happens in Romans chapter 8. The earth is in the labor of childbirth. It's waiting. All of creation is waiting to see the sons of God revealed, so that it can finally receive its reformation. So I wonder if there's maybe some kind of like,
is it rest from fighting?
Yeah, I would wonder, like the violence that occurs as a result of sin. Because that's a part of what Judges has put on the table for us, is like this is what happens to God's good order. Because you got to think, they came into a land that's flowing with milk and honey. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like the house is already built, the vineyard's already planted, like it's already ordered and maintained and ready to go. But as they go, that order gets unordered or disordered. Chaos abounds. And the land doesn't have rest, which is interesting whenever there's chaos. Because what do we attach that to? God hovers over the tohu vavohu, the chaos of nothingness, and then orders all things by creating from nothing. Okay? So I wonder if there's some attachment now in there In other words, maybe it's not a direct reference, but it's a concept that gets played over and over again. That the land having rest is, maybe an easy or quick way of saying that there's peace. But I wonder if there's another kind of like spiritual reality to that as well. I'll have to do some research on that, Kevin, because that's really interesting.
The turn of phrase that caught my ear, and you see this throughout the Old Testament, is Israel did evil in the eyes of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting. It wasn't, it just doesn't say that they did evil, but
Right.
evil in the eye. It makes me wonder if there's some significance to that.
Well,
Well, I think it just reflects back to, and they did what was right in their own eyes.
Oh, it's
I think this
it's
is
an
what
opposite of okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like the Lord's like,
In the
this
eyes
is really
of-
wrong. But they're just like, no, this is good. This is
Yeah.
To
good.
God's judgment, to God's discernment, to God's okay.
Yeah, I would bet there's something.
Yeah.
I would bet the
maybe there's-
contrast is purposely written that way. Well, and of course, you think back to Genesis chapter 3. She sees the fruit, and she believes based upon her seeing that this is going to be, or it's pleasing to the eye. It even goes on to say, and so seeing this, that's when she reaches out her hand and takes, and that's when their eyes are then opened. So like, there's all this kind of like seeing language that's talked about. And again, if I'm right about this like order chaos kind of thing that's going on in the creation narrative, but then devolves as a result of sin, and we're seeing it here in the Judges, that the good order of the new Eden, which would be the promised land, a kind of Eden, a type of Eden, that when we see our own way, what ends up happening is that we get exiled. we live in the reality more fully of exile, which would be a chaotic reality. So I wonder if there's some attachment to that as well. Like again, maybe not a direct quotation, but a kind of allusion to this reality that we don't see properly, and that what we see, what we think is good, actually ends up being our undoing. They thought it was good to have a covenant with the Canaanites and to not tear down the idols, but that becomes a snare to them in the end.
Well, yeah, which is,
Oh,
this is like paint. So it's the same thing that Saul does when he's told to wipe out the Amalekites, and he's
And he
like,
doesn't.
Nope,
Yep.
I'm going to do this instead.
Correct.
And we're going to take the plunder for
Correct.
an offering, and he's like, no, I told you to leave that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
So
He had a pride problem, and
Oh,
he
big time.
wanted
Yeah.
things to look good for him. So that's
time.
why he did that.
So okay, so we like these are some of the particular judges that we talk through. Gideon's story is really interesting. This reluctant judge who kind of steps in to do the thing, doesn't really end perfectly well, but on and on we go with the judges. Finally, we get past Samson. What I thought was really fascinating on my read through this time was that chapters 17 through 21, which you already pointed out. Actually, maybe before we're on camera, tell us again. At the beginning of 17.
Yeah, so at the beginning of 17, verse 6, yeah. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And that's the closing verse
Correct.
to the chapter at 21 and 25.
And what I noticed, structurally speaking, is that at the close of the book of Judges, there are no more judges. There's also no oppression from outside forces. So the oppression that occurs in these chapters is coming from within, which is kind of called out by the beginning in chapter 17.
Correct.
And then capped off in chapter 21 as the closing statement. So it's not even that's the only time that statement arrives as a conclusion to the narrative. It's that it's called out that even though we have no judge, and even though we're not under oppression, look how terrible things go when we refuse to see the world and our place in it the way God wants us to.
Yep.
And chapter 17 and on are some of the most brutal and terrible things that you're going to read in your entire Bible. One of them has to do with here. Let me pull up 17 here before I start shooting at the hip.
While you're doing it, we have to point out in 6, just before we move on, is the angel of the Lord.
Oh, thank you.
We can't skip over Jesus. Or potentially Jesus.
So we have an instance in Judges 2 where he shows up. We have an instance in where Deborah calls him out. So did he appear to her and we just don't know about it? Could be, possibly, don't know. But we have an appearance in chapter 6. He comes to Gideon And he says, warrior of the Lord, or whatever he says to him, mighty warrior, or something like that.
Which is so cool, right?
Mighty man of
He's got
valor.
such-
Mighty man of valor, that's it. Yeah, which he's
As
obviously
he's
not.
like hiding it, yeah.
Yes.
But what he needs to hear from God, right?
That's right. We have an appearance there. And then we have another appearance actually to Samson's parents, I believe in chapter 13. Samson's parents receive the promise that they're going to have a son. But the promise comes from the angel of the Lord who appears.
Yep.
And gives them the instructions about the Nazirite vow, and he'll never touch his hair will never touch a razor, and he'll never, touch dead things that are unclean, that kind of thing. Which, of course, then he goes on to do everything that the angel of the Lord specifically says he should not do.
But still, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him.
Yes.
Power.
Yes, which again we need to distinguish, and I'm glad that you're bringing, because you brought it up again earlier, and you're bringing it up again now. It's when the Spirit of the Lord comes upon someone, that's different than what we mean when the Spirit comes to reside and live in us in the New Testament era, in the church era. It's not a problem for the Spirit to be on someone and empower them for a task, whatever it is that God is going to do within them, or rather through them, I should say, because we've seen that with the guys who were. It was a Bezalel, I believe his name was, in Exodus, who had the Spirit of God on him, who did the.
Oh, we're not talking about prophesying.
Not prophesying. That was another moment. Bezalel is one of the craftsmen. He's one of the craftsmen who is given the Spirit of the Lord to be able to work in all these different things.
For the tabernacle.
Yeah, to make the tabernacle. No, but you're right. There is another moment with the 70 plus 2 where the Spirit of the Lord falls upon them and they're able to prophesy, which is a fascinating thing.
And King Saul, the Spirit came upon him.
So
And he was prophesying.
That's him for David. Yeah, he prophesied.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's I think a phrase in 2 Samuel where it's like, and they used to say this about Saul. Is Saul one of the prophets? As if that was like a normal thing that people said about him. I love when you get those little kind of details, breadcrumbs like that. Yeah, it's okay for the Spirit to fall on people, but that's distinct from whatever Moses is pointing out in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 6, which is the heart circumcision, internal transformation thing that we're going to need to have happen within us. That's the thing that we're going to talk about later in the series as we get into what the prophets are foreseeing, actually. And then, of course, what Jesus is going to come and fulfill in his own life, in death and burial and resurrection. But yeah, I thank you guys for pointing that out, because the Spirit of God, along with the visible Yahweh, shows up multiple times in the Old Testament. So we'd have to make some inferences about that. They seem to be doing separate things. In other words, you can have the Father speaking from heaven, who's unseen, but then you have a visible appearance of Yahweh, and then you also have the Spirit. Someone might say, Trinity, yeah.
And I think I just noticed this going back to him appearing to Samson's parents. So he does it first time to his mother, and then his mother's like, "Oh, do it again." And then so he does. And so she prays, and then he's like, and then she's like, "Look, the man who came to me the other day has just now appeared to me." So it's like we're talking about. It's a man again.
It's a physical appearance.
Yeah.
It's obviously a physical appearance.
Yeah.
And again, the angel of the Lord doesn't talk with like it's just a message deliverer.
Right.
The angel of the Lord talks as though he is God. So that's why we keep wanting to point those instances out. Come on.
And then this is just a different. And anyway, so he says. In that same moment, he's like, when he came to the man, he said to him, "Are you the man who spoke to this woman?" And he said, "I am."
I am.
I am.
Keep pointing it out, Miguel, because we need to see this stuff. This is important stuff. Yeah, probably. Well, maybe not probably, but we would assume using the same kind of title, the same name of God. Yeah. Then okay. So can we jump to chapter 17?
Yep.
Okay. No. I appreciate you pausing us. I love that. Then we get into chapter 17, and Micah, who's not the Micah prophet we're familiar with from the later prophets, but a different Micah. What he does is he sets up some false place of worship. Here's what it says, verse 5 in chapter 17. Now this man Micah had a shrine, and he had an ephod, and some what? Household gods. and installed one of his sons as his priest. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit, which is a little different, but it's a similar phrase to or the way it's rendered here in my NIV version.
Yeah.
Was the tabernacle still in practice during this whole time?
Supposed to be.
Wow.
Supposed to be. And I'd have to look up to see if there's evidence that it was ever fully established or not.
Oh.
It seems like it was, though, because Joshua and Eleazar the priest seem to have done that. And I believe it's at Shiloh is where the installation of the
Because
tabernacle
later on
was.
Samuel is
Correct.
living
Is there in Shiloh
tabernacle.
with Eli. Correct.
So an ephod is a sacred garment, but we
Yes.
presume it was a sacred garment to an idol, not the ephod.
No, the ephod.
It was
That was supposed to be used. Yes,
ephod.
that was supposed to be used
Whoa.
in the tabernacle.
Whoa!
And Micah is now setting himself up as though he is a priest, even though he is not. This is how bad it's gotten.
and
Okay?
he's got idols.
Yes. So what he does is now verse 7. A young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, who had been living within the clan of Judah, left that town in search of some place to stay. On his way, he came to Micah's house in the hill country of Ephraim. Micah asked him, "Where are you from?" "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah," he said. "I'm looking for a place to stay." Then Micah said to him, "Live with me and my father and be my father and priest, and I'll give you 10 shekels of silver a year, your clothes and your food." So the Levite agreed to live with him, and the young man became like one of his sons to him. Then Micah installed the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in his house. And Micah said, "Now I know the Lord will be good to me, since this Levite has become my priest." But again, the priest to what?
Okay.
Because it's the household gods that stand as the issue there.
So
with Micah.
we're saying Micah corrupted a Levite,
Correct.
a young Levite.
Correct. It's not looking good. So okay, this might seem like this is like a microcosm. This could seem like a small thing.
Okay, so did he is the Levite, is that who they're talking about in verse 5? That's who he consecrated? I'm confused here. Or did he do this? I'm confused.
I think they're talking about Micah
again.
there.
Okay, so in verse 5 it says, he had a shrine, made an ephod, and a household idols, and he consecrated one of his sons and
Made an
became his
ephod.
priest.
Yeah.
So then he got
No, it was initially one of his sons.
Okay.
But then later on, a Levite, and this is the way that I've conceptualized this. I could be wrong,
Yeah.
so don't quote me on this. But the way that I conceptualize this is that to legitimate his worship of whatever the household gods are,
Yeah.
that's when he's like, oh, I can take this opportunity to have a Levite who all of Israel knows. The Levites are the ones that lead us to the Lord.
So if they're saying it's okay,
then it's all good.
yeah. And this is why they did what was right.
Kind of like in the Northern Kingdom for a while, they said they were going to worship God, but they had the idols.
Correct. So that's actually the next chapter.
Oh, okay.
That's actually the next chapter.
Okay.
Is the Danite. So this is okay. So there's the progression. This might seem like a microcosm or an innocuous little thing. Okay. Well, now we're going to move from one family up to one whole tribe.
Okay.
Then the next chapter is Dan. The Danites. They don't like where they're at because they've not been able to drive out the Amorites. I think that's among them. They've been contained to the mountainous region of their small space. So they're not happy with that. So what they do is they reject their tribal allotment. And then they go and hang out with Micah, and then they bring this same priest, and they go up into the north. I believe it's the city of Laish. Is that right? That's right, Laish in the north, and they wipe out these people in this town, and then they install their tribe, Dan, there in the north, with Micah as their guy who's and the priest with him who's leading the whole thing. And what they're actually doing is they've set up, again, a counter place of worship to the place there in Shiloh, which would be the tabernacle.
Okay.
So it gets really bad. And Dan, of course, we know from our spiritual connections to Mount Hermon, which would be the site of where the gates of hell were considered to be, where Satan's mountain was, if you want to put it that way. That's way up there in the north. Mount Hermon would be up here, and Dan would be up in this space, up in the far, far north. And that's also the region of Bashan, where we know the giants are supposed to have been hailed from. Okay, so there's a spiritual signal all going on in here. Let's see if we can just kind of peruse through, or not peruse, but rather glance through the story of Dan. And in those days, this would be chapter 18. In those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking a place of their own where they might settle, because they had not yet come into an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. So the Danites sent 5 of their leading men from Zorah and Eshtaol to spy out the land and explore it. These men represented all the Danites. They told them, go explore the land. So they entered the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah, where they spent the night. When they were near Micah's house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. So they turned in there and asked him, who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? Why are you here? He told them what Micah had done for him. He said, he has hired me and I am to be his priest. So they said to him, please inquire of God to learn about whether our journey will be successful. Go in peace. Your journey has the Lord's approval. So the 5 men left and came to Laish, where they saw that the people were living in safety like the Sidonians, at peace and secure. And since their land lacked nothing, they were prosperous. Also, they lived a long way from the Sidonians and had no relationship with anyone else. When they returned to Zorah and Eshtaol, their fellow Danites asked them, how did you find things? They answered, come, let us attack them. We have seen the land and it is very good. Aren't you going to do something? Notice what they've done. They've seen the land and that it's very good. Again, another attachment to that. Aren't you going to do something? Don't hesitate to go there and take it over. When you get there, you will find an unsuspecting people and spacious land that God has put into your hands, and a land that lacks nothing, whatever. Then 600 men, the Danites, armed for battle, they go up there, and they whoop on all the people, and they install themselves in there. The 5 men who had spied out the land of Laish said to their fellow Danites, do you know that one of the houses has an ephod, some household gods, and an image overlaid with silver? Now you know what to do. So they turned in there and went to the house of the young Levite at Micah's place and greeted him. The 600 Danites, armed for battle, stood at the entrance of the gate. The 5 men who had spied out the land went inside and took the idol, the ephod, and the household gods, while the priest and the 600 armed men stood at the entrance of the gate. When the 5 men went into Micah's house and took the idol, the ephod of the household gods, the priest said to them, what are you doing? They answered him, be quiet, don't say a word, come with us and be our father and priest. Isn't it better that you serve a tribe and clan in Israel as a priest rather than just one man's household? The priest was very pleased. He took the ephod, the household gods, and the idol and went along with the people, putting their little children, their livestock, and their possessions in front of them, and they turned away and left. When they had gone some distance from Micah's house, the men who lived near Micah were called together and overtook the Danites. As they shouted after them, the Danites turned and said to Micah, what's the matter with you that you called out our men to fight? He replied, you took the gods I made and my priest and went away. What else do I have now? How can you ask what's the matter with you? The Danites answered, don't argue with us, or some of the men may get angry and attack you, and your family will lose their lives. So the Danites went their way, and Micah, seeing that they were too strong for him, turned around and went back. Then they took what Micah had made and his priest and went to Laish against the people at peace and secure. They attacked them with sword and burned down their city. There was no one to rescue them because they lived a long way from Sidon and had no relationship with anyone else. The Danites rebuilt the city and settled there. They named it Dan, after their ancestor Dan, who was born in Israel, though the city used to be called Laish. There the Danites set up for themselves the idol, and Jonathan, son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests for the tribe of Dan. Notice that.
But yeah.
The sons of Moses.
Sons of Moses.
Yes. There, verse 30. There the Danites set up for themselves the idol that they'd taken, and Jonathan, son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests for the tribe of Dan. What was that?
Mine says Manasseh.
Sons of Manasseh? Oh, interesting that we have a different rendering.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, but...
So it says, many Hebrew manuscripts, some Septuagint manuscripts and Vulgate, many other Hebrew manuscripts and some others Septuagint manuscripts use Manasseh. Mm-hmm. But again, Jonathan, son of Gershom, comes from Exodus 2:22. That would be the son of Moses. Okay. And his sons were priests for the tribe of Dan until the time of captivity of the land, which would be the exile way in the future. Mm-hmm. They continued to use the idol Micah had made all the time the house of God was in Shiloh. So we have a rival worship site that's set up to other gods, run by Moses' descendants.
Wow.
That's how bad it's gotten.
This seems so, I don't know, abstract from the main story. What's the whole gist of putting a whole chapter
for this
story?
It's to point out the religious decay that's occurred. It's to point out that these tribes in this loose confederation are now rebelling not only against not just in their own homeland, not just doing a bad thing or being put upon by other people or oppressed. In fact, they have become those who oppress others, and they are the ones who are setting up rival worship to other gods. Wow. So it's not that they're just doing the other worship to other gods that are being presented to them. It's that they're inventing their own,
Right.
and they're borrowing from the clout or authority of God's Levite, exactly, of the Levites, to now set up their own place. It's a highlight of how bad things have gotten. Then we get to the story, chapter 19. In those days, Israel had no king. Now, a Levite who lived in a remote hill country of Ephraim, okay, anyway, he takes his concubine, which Levites are not supposed to have, by the way. So already this is not a great story. Okay, takes the concubine, and what ends up happening with this concubine is that men want to sexually abuse, first the Levite.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the story of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
Send out those men that we might have sex with them, is what the men of Sodom and Gomorrah say. So in other words, what we would, if we were to read this whole story, what we would be seeing is that in the nation of Israel, we have now a new Sodom and Gomorrah. That's how bad things have gotten. That the place that God judged in Sodom and Gomorrah has now become so terrible that even one of the Israelite places is said to be like a Sodom and Gomorrah. And what happens is this woman gets sexually abused to death. And what the Levite does is, instead of denouncing the men, well, he does in a way, but instead of denouncing the men, what he does is he separates her dead body into pieces, and then mails pieces of her body to each of the tribes so that they can come and take up arms. And this is what they do.
Against the whole tribe of
Benjamin. Correct, because that's who's perpetrated this act against this woman. So the end of Judges is a story of sexual assault. Rival worship to another god, sexual assault that leads to civil war. That's the end of the story of Judges. That's how bad things have gotten. When, according to the punchline of chapter 21, in those days Israel had no king. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. This is why there's no judge narrative. There's no judge here, and there's no oppression from other people. What the Bible is trying to point out to us is that this is how wicked our hearts are. That left to our own devices, when we see things our own way, we will set up our own gods of our own making, and we will, and all the way up and leading into violence, civil war, anarchy. That's the point. Anarchy now has completely enveloped them. It's chaos in the new land of Eden. That's supposed to be a type of glorious place that they're supposed to inhabit this land and worship Yahweh and be in covenant with Him. So that's the story of Judges.
So in the book of Judges, God is supposed to be the king, is the king of Israel. Well, God is the king of Israel and is supposed to be the king of Israel. I'm going to make an excuse for them and just say,
Really?
gosh, how that probably seemed kind of like insecure for them. Of all these other nations, they're, let's say, more organized, and we're just these tribes out here. We have to see our God as a really big God if He's going to be a God that's going to protect us when we don't have the structure like all these enemies around us.
Right.
And strong human leaders.
Correct. I think you just said it, Jim. Strong human leaders. I think that's the thing that they are placing their hope in. So if we can have how about this? How about we frame it this way? If I can just have the right institution, if I can just have the right education, if I can just have the government take care of these particular needs, then I'll be okay. So I think what we're seeing now is that anarchy doesn't work. So if we want to try that as a form of of belief, I want to live this way. I don't want to be beholden to nobody else. I'm gonna do what's right in my own eyes. Well, we see the consequences of that. It's not going to go well. We've seen what it looks like to be led by a prophet. Even then, it's not going to go great. Even if he can, constrain some of that. Now the next question will be, okay, well, what if we try out a kingdom? Well, surely that will be enough to restrain our wicked hearts and to bring us into covenant faithfulness with the Lord. So it's like what the Bible is doing in a really sophisticated way, not in a just come out and tell you everything kind of way, but in a sophisticated way. It's like it's pointing out to us that no matter what kind of human institution we bring in, even that won't be our salvation. We need something deeper that God has to do for us and in us, not just around us.
Overthinking, Jim, what's going through my mind is this notion that throughout history, governments are a mixed bag, right? So there are times when we have good governments and times that seem good, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm even going to the Pax Romana, right? And thinking that presumably brought prosperity to some people, and yet huge portions of that population were enslaved and didn't really get the blessings of Pax Romana.
So what we're going to... Go ahead.
Even when they get to kings and they ask for a king, and God says, but I'm your king. No, we want a king. Okay, you can have a king, but this is what's going to happen.
Yep, taxing
he's
and
going to just what
draft
you said.
you.
Yeah.
And isn't it
No,
interesting?
give it to me.
That's right. We want that. We need that.
Yeah.
Right? That's how they see it.
Yeah.
Okay? And isn't it interesting that the king that they're going to go for, what's his description?
He's tall, good looking.
Interesting.
Right.
Where have we seen
Oh,
tall leaders?
Well, in fact, I think almost always the taller wins the presidency, by the way.
That's I'm pretty sure that's the case. There's, in a spiritual sense, if you're going along with the Bible's narrative so far, the men of renown are these Nephilim, right? They are the ones. They are the ones that lead the
Place
people.
to go.
So it's like, so Saul, well, he's tall. He must be important. He must be the right guy because all the tall people are the ones. Okay, I know that sounds a little reductionistic, but I think we're supposed to not just see the characteristic of tallness. We're supposed to recognize the spiritual signal that's being reflected to us.
Yeah.
Right? Because even the Philistine army relies on a giant to fight their battles. It's the same with who they think Saul is actually going to be. Yeah. So anyway, all to say, there's this spiritual reality that's this undercurrent all the way throughout. Again, it's this background reality. And I think what the Bible is sophisticatedly, if that's a word, in a sophisticated way showing us is that humanity is going to keep trying these institutions, but nothing is going to finally answer the wickedness of our own hearts, the reality of sin that pervades every element of us and one another. So, we can try a loose confederation, we can try anarchy. Next, we got to try a kingdom. Let's see if that works out. And I think what God is doing is he's allowing the story to progress so that we would have no excuse, so that when he brings about the real answer, we would actually recognize it as good news. Because it is true, because we're about to introduce another E word into our exile theme, which would be the word empire. So we have to now deal with what is an empire, what is its, how does it wield its authority, how does it develop its story, where does its authority come from, according to the empire itself. Because we're about to enter a phase of kingdom, but then we're going to start entering after the phase of the kingdom, we're going to start seeing these prophets pop up and talk about even the evils of the kingdom, the Israelite kingdom, and the evils of the other kingdoms around them. And I think kingdom is a very medieval word. It's not necessarily the word that might be used back in that time. So
our understanding of kingdom is different than, you're saying our understanding of kingdom is different than the Bible.
Yeah.
In the Bible, when it says kingdom,
we use kingdom, but again, we get that word through English. I think empire is another appropriate word. And empire has a little more connotation to it, I think, than kingdom does. And we're going to talk about that when we get there, because God's going to have to deal with empire as well. So we're out in exile, my friends. Thankfully, the next book that we're going to open up to is a love story. Not today, but in the next series, because the order of the books are Joshua, Judges, Ruth. And like I said this past Sunday, in the same way that Leviticus comes to our rescue at the close of Exodus, well, guess what? Ruth is going to come to our rescue at the close of Judges. So, my friends, make sure that you're keeping up with our sermon series on the Exile. We're going to be talking about Ruth for the next, 2 to 4 weeks. We'll see how I feel. And then we're going to get into the formation of the kingdom following that. Appreciate you guys being here. Thanks.
Yeah,
Catch you at the next cutting room.
Very fun.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Cutting Room Floor. If you have any questions or want to know more about what we discussed, send an email to Church on the Rock. Like and subscribe to receive notifications for any videos we post. May God bless your study of His Word.